to the Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultations Conference, Equity from the Start. My name is Frances Duran, and I will serve as your session facilitator today. I'm happy to say that I am joined by Melkeisha Knight, who will be our technology host. This session, as you may have just heard, is being recorded as a reminder, and transcription is also available through the Zoom platform. Should you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in chat. We'll try to answer them during the session, and if we can't answer them now, we will try to follow up with you as best as we can. We also wanted to let you know before we begin, just a reminder that the views, policies, and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the authors and don't necessarily represent the views of SAMHSA or HHS. So with that being said, I am very happy to turn it over to Toshiko Pinckney, who is going to kick us off. So we know you're going to enjoy today's presentation. So please, Pinckney, it's all you.
Thank you, Ms. Frances. Good afternoon. Learning Empowered, One Child at a Time, the Path to Equity in Florida. I'd like to go ahead and it's going to be presented by our Executive Director, Dr. Lisa Negrini. I'm Toshiko Pinckney. I'm the Director of Operations here as well. And then Jenny Hughes, who is our Director in Training. Learning Empowered operates from the Gulf Coast of Florida, which is in the beautiful St. Petersburg area. We have been in business for over 40 years as a nonprofit business, primarily serving citizenship, immigration, children birth through 5 with mental health services, and children birth to 5 and their families. Learning Empowered has 2 campuses within the city of St. Petersburg. And those campuses are in what we would consider like Lellman area and our Jungle Terrace area within our community. One of the new exciting programs that we are glad to be offering is going to be our new Infant Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation Program. Our IMH department, as you see, is a part of our Empowering Babies and Families program, which has 1 supervisor and 3 IECMHCs also within the program. We do have a reflective supervisor clinician, an assessment coordinator, a trainer and coach, and a referral and family engagement specialist. Our Triangles program that we offer, we have 1 supervisor who also is a clinician, 1 IECMHC, 5 teachers, and 1 behavioral specialist. Just some quick facts for Pinellas County. Like I said, I am a St. Petersburg native. I'm a true Floridian. Growing up in the beautiful city of St. Petersburg, I have witnessed negative and positive racial change within my city. We do have about 1 million permanent residents. 26 of the Black individuals and households that live in poverty compared to 11% of our white individuals and households. We do live in a mostly dense populated county in Florida. Our kindergarten readiness rate is around 59% statewide for pre-pandemic and 51% in the year of 2022. Rates are disproportionate by race and geography. Racism is a major issue in our community. Like I said, the negative and the positive of that, like back in 1996, the riot and the shooting of Tyrone Lewis occurred within our city. That kicked off a major event within our dynamic within our city, as well as we do offer several different, in the last about 10 years or so, we've seen progress in the stance of intentional equity and inclusive progress. As where we have right now, we do have an African-American mayor and an African-American police chief in high-ranked positions within our city. One of the agencies that is been a strong advocate within our city is the Foundation of a Healthy St. Petersburg. They have been one of the most vocal advocates of change within our city, along with countless others. So we would like to take a quick poll just to see where you are. How would you describe your involvement in an IECMHC program? Are you looking to begin a program? Are you in pre-planning stage of an implementation? Implementing a new IECMHC program? Offering a IECMHC services for at least 1 year? And the last one, offering an IECMHC services for over 1 to 5 years.
I don't know if you can see it or not. Can everyone see it? Or just me?
I can see it.
Okay.
Can see it, yeah.
So do you want me to jump in here?
You can go ahead.
So it looks like the majority of people are looking to begin a program and seeking funds, or they've been offering it for a year. So maybe what they're interested in is learning about how a new program was able to leverage funds locally or to incorporate inequity, or excuse me, not inequity, the opposite of inequity, to incorporate equity into our services. So hopefully we can answer those questions as we move forward.
Okay.
So, hi, I'm Jenny Hughes. Like Toshiko said, I'm the director of training here. I also write grants occasionally and help to implement some of the programs that we are so blessed to receive. And I want to mention that, you know, it's pretty obvious that Dr. Negrini and I, at least, are not spring chickens. I mean, we look pretty good for our age, but we've been doing this for over 30 years. And Toshiko is obviously a little bit younger than us, but she's been doing this her entire career as well. And throughout our shared professional experiences, what we've all witnessed and what we care about is the unfair distribution of services, concern, investment, support of our Black and Brown community members and brothers and sisters. And we've seen the plight of minorities struggling to recover from the severe wrongs that have been put upon them by their own country. So we recognize also that despite our strong and maybe naive desires to help people and make an impact just through our own efforts, that the main problem lies within institutions, laws, and structures, but mostly within the minds of others, primarily those in control of money or making decisions. So before we came to Learning Empowered, Dr. Negrini and I and Toshiko all worked together for different agencies, and we partnered in different ways. And it's kind of been our dream for a long time to marry early learning with mental health and to make significant contributions to changing the mindset and erecting programs that represent equity, fairness, and anti-racist practices. So we learned about early mental health consultation in the early 2000s, and we all agreed that it had a lot of promise to make a difference and to create shifts and disparities in our community. But first, we had to really understand and recognize the barriers, not just to funding, but to equity. So one of those barriers is the limited exposure to the model in Florida. In 2013, FSU's Harris Institute conducted a study and a review of the model in Florida and convened actually locally to review it and discuss it with mental health providers and early learning providers back then. And they found that, yes, 28 counties were doing mental health consultation or some portion of the model, but they had limited success. And some of the reasons they cited were very few clinicians or mental health professionals understood the model. The funding was very minor, structure. There wasn't limited support or recognition of it statewide. And we do know that there has been some reimbursement options along the way, but certainly not enough to fund an entire program or to serve a large community. However, if anybody here knows of any reimbursable options for mental health consultation, please let us know. Our local ELC does support the consultation model, but they really haven't begun to prioritize funding for it here in our county. Our state government is another issue. If you're familiar at all with Florida state government, funding has been decreased steadily for mental health programs, especially for children under age 5 prior to the pandemic. And that funding now is on the uptick, but it's primarily for older children, and it can typically be tied to addressing and preventing gun violence. There's also some internal conflict among legislators about what interventions are appropriate and do not limit parent choice in helping children. So while they battle it out and try to figure it out, we decided to take action on the ground floor here. And I'm sure that our barriers to equity are not unique. As we know, racism and inequity have become more of a focus of conversation across the country in recent years. I also think that many people don't really think of Florida as being part of the Deep South. They sort of think of maybe Alabama or Louisiana in that way. When they think of Florida, they think of Disney and the beaches and vacations. But oh no, let me tell you, it is steeped in racism and disparity that can easily contend with other states in that lineup. The school district here is a major culprit of that situation, and I'll share a little bit about that more in a minute. But I know that's typical in other places as well. And another thing to note, and these are scary things to say out loud, but they have to be said, is that the majority of our representatives and people who make decisions about funding are mature white men who have limited life experience or intersection with people different from them to help them make better or different decisions. So also you can see on our limitations to equity that our child opportunities in our community are very low across the board for education, mental health access, and other things like green spaces in our community. And I would compare it in some ways to some operations in third world countries. So unfair, inequitable, and racist systems, practices, and rules they're merely constructs of thinking. That's really the heart of the issue. Racist thinking that leads to creating those systems and outcomes. It indicates what we really need to do is change the minds and hearts of people. It's a big task. It's very difficult, and people have been successful in doing it over the centuries, or it wouldn't be where we are today. So we recognize that, and we've done our best to speak out about it. We've talked about racism openly, and we've tried to make it a shameful thing to participate in, and also show what good can come of other options. For example, pointing out that the consultation model is a great model to be employed as an alternative that's not only evidence-based, but works. So, we started really looking at the key factors to start to push the needle locally from a dismal 2 or 3 on the equity scale to a higher number. So first, let me tell you about the Concerned Organization for Quality Education of Black Students. I know that's a mouthful. It's very well known around here. We call it COQUEBS. It is a group of community leaders and advocates who were formed during the Crowley versus Pinellas County School Board lawsuit back in 2000. So the COQUEBS group stepped in for Crowley that claimed that our school board was not providing adequate or equitable education based not only on anecdotes and lived experiences that had been talked about for many years, but the results in the educational outcomes for Black and Brown children. And those outcomes included failing grades for entire schools, plummeting graduation rates, years of failing test scores, unequivocally imbalanced discipline reports for Black children and white children, and poor representation of color and ethnicity among teachers. So that suit was settled back in 2010, and the school board set about a plan to fix things, monitored by COQUEBS. Now, COQUEBS had also set up a school readiness committee at the time to examine how school readiness rates in the early learning system in general was contributing to the problem. Now, this is a committee that all 3 of us have been very involved in all these last 13 years. So the school came up with a plan, and it wasn't really producing any results until about 2017. Then, bam, Failure Factories came out, and Failure Factories was a piece, a scathing investigative piece out of the Miami Herald and the Tampa Bay Times that pointed the finger basically at the school system, basically saying, shame on you, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And then all of a sudden, legislators started getting interested. And the Department of Ed started sniffing around and asking questions. And people who made decisions or had clout, so to speak, started investigating and looking into the failure of the school system based on all of this media attention that we had. So this is all factual. This is not an opinion of any kind. It's the way it happened. The school board revised its plan, changed the name, and came up with 6 steps to change outcomes. And just this year, since 2017, we're starting to see some movement and change. So suddenly when people who didn't really give a hoot before get involved, then things start to happen, right? That's sort of the way our country works. Also, around the same time, our little communities of St. Petersburg and Clearwater, where the greatest reflection of minorities live, began to make some major societal shifts. Young people started moving in. University of South Florida, which is located right in the heart of St. Petersburg on the water, they started to attract more degree-seeking young people and minorities. But the biggest thing is, the most interesting to me, is that just recently in a report that came out by the United Way for 2022, is that there are more minority youth living in St. Petersburg now than there are elderly white people or senior citizens, which really is a shocker to me, because, you know, for years we've been known as the home of the newlywed and nearly dead. I mean, that's kind of been the joke about who we are: a retirement community, a wedding destination. And for those of us who make this our home, those structures just provided a veiled front to cover up the plight of our people who were living and working and struggling to survive. So this new data that we're looking at, and these demographic shifts, show that more Black professionals with degrees are joining the workforce, and their voices are taking the lead in group initiatives. So what we used to see around the table was a lot of really good intentioned white professionals who, you know, cornerstoned those positions, speaking and advocating for equity in decision-making settings. But now, more often, we're seeing our Black leaders and people that represent different minorities taking the helm and guiding those decisions with white people as partners, which is really how change is going to happen and how we've seen it happen in other communities across the country. So if more people care, and more white people actually care enough to step outside of their own fears or ignorance or prejudices and partner in real ways with our Black counterparts and say, how can I help you with this? How can I support you? How can I be a part of a solution? I'm here to back you up and take action and be responsible to this cause. Things start to change. Those are kind of exciting to me, because I felt like, and we all sort of felt like, we've seen these things happen and we've talked about them anecdotally around the table, but to actually have data to show it has been happening was a little exciting for us. So I'm not going to read through all of this. You can look at it and I'll just give you some of the highlights, but this is sort of also coinciding with those steps and things that were happening in our community and those societal shifts. We were taking some actions, and these are some of the things that we were doing. So SAMHSA launched the launch project, and it just happened to land right here in Pinellas County, and I just happened to be the coordinator of it. So since I loved infant early childhood mental health consultation, Dr. Negrini worked at the University of South Florida, and Toshiko was running childcare programs at Learning Empowered. We knew that this was an opportunity through the launch project to promote the model. So that's exactly what we did. We brought Neil Horn down here, and I think his colleague, Amy Hunter, I think was her name. I'm sorry, I didn't double check that, but I think that was her name. Licensed clinical social worker. And we invited them down through launch and for 2 days to talk about consultation. Well, nobody really knew what consultation was here. Nobody was doing it. It was unheard of. So we sort of advertised it as a new model to impact challenging behaviors. Well, everybody wants to come out and hear about that, right? And of course, Neil is so, gregarious and enigmatic, and everybody loves the two of them together, that a lot of people came and they really liked it a lot. But the people who really liked it was our local children's council. They came, we invited them on purpose, and they came and they were like, this sounds great. And I think they probably knew a little bit about it beforehand, but they liked it even more after they heard Neil talk about it. So this was sort of laying the groundwork for future funding. Then FAME began to promote it and talk about it and post trainings on it. And the COQUEBs, we would talk about it in school readiness committee all the time and bring it up as a viable model and to ensure equity and to decrease disparities. And we started spreading the word. Also, Dr. Negrini took advantage of all these opportunities when she was at USF, and she requested money from our state legislature through a partnership with one of our local Black representatives, a legislator, as a means of balancing disparities. And they were really successful in getting a pretty large chunk of money to launch consultation in 6 childcare sites in predominantly neighborhood that had mostly minorities operating childcares in those areas, which was great, but it was only for a year, not nearly enough to get it perfect, but it was meant to be because we really learned a lot. And during this time, we invited Neil and Amy to come back at USF and to train on the model again with an even bigger turnout now that we had started spreading the word a little bit. And people were still wanting to come to training, even though we weren't offering the service anywhere, except for that one grant that we had. So we also, during that time after Neil came down, we did a 1-year learning collaborative online. This is before COVID, you know, we were pretty ahead of our time, and a group of mental health professionals that were involved. And in a way, we were sort of building like a pyramid model to expand the message to others and thereby expanding the impact. Let's see. So we promoted it tirelessly and we got others on board. And because it's evidence-based, or they would come to the learning sessions or the conferences and saw that it worked and started hearing about it more nationally and at our state level, it started to spread like wildfire around the child serving community. So finally, we all landed together at Learning Powered with Dr. Negrini at the helm as our executive director. And we knew that this was our opportunity because Learning Empowered was primarily providing early learning programming. And the majority of the children that we worked with were living in poverty and accessing subsidized childcare funds from the state. And we thought this is our chance to finally try to get some money to do this. So we got a small grant from United Way. We hired one consultant who was able to serve our children only. And that was great. And we called that the Empowering Babies and Families program, little wordplay there. But we knew that was only one step in the scaling up process. So then we wrote another grant to our children's council, who by now had been hearing about the model from not only us, but our cohorts. And believe me, we made sure that we infused the information with people who had perceived power to spread the word. And that gave us enough money to add to the Empowering Babies and Families program and hire 3 more consultants and a reflective supervisor and a clinical supervisor to start serving the community. Then we went for the big bucks and we wrote an even bigger grant to request our children's council again for the Triangles program, what Toshiko mentioned earlier. That's part mental health services, direct services like counseling and therapy, part consultation, making sure we separate out the two, and part specialized classroom for those 3 and 4-year-old children who are not being successful in typical childcare programs, are being expelled for trauma-based behaviors or undiagnosed disabilities, and they're waiting for their child find or Part B evaluation. And they really don't have any place else to go. So that's our Triangles program. And then our Empowering Babies and Families program does straight mental health consultation in the community. So can we do another poll? Because I'd like to know a little bit more about the level of racism and impact in your community, the folks who are joining us, and see if we have some of the same experiences. I'd be curious. How would you rate the level and impact of racism in your community? Very high, moderately high, not sure, moderately low, or very low? Well, I see that 37% say either very high or moderately high. Some aren't sure. And a couple of folks say very low, which, wow, I wish I knew where you live. Maybe I want to retire there. It sounds good. Maybe we can find that out in the chat. Okay, so we're sort of across the board here. That's interesting. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about funding before Dr. Negrini steps in as our our final speaker and our closer for our presentation. Because funding really is the bottom line, isn't it? I mean, we can all have all these things that we're putting in place for equity, which we're going to talk about the way we've structured our own program to make that a priority. But funding is the issue. So our situation here is pretty sad. When I was watching some of the presentations from the last virtual conference from Georgetown, I was so shocked to see several people presenting on what they were doing with their state dollars. I mean, Pennsylvania, Colorado, I definitely remember Colorado talking about it, because not only were they getting money to provide the service, but they're also getting money to evaluate the service, to drive future service provision. And I thought, wow, I'm so envious. How amazing is that? And, you know, there's no pretending that that's just not going to happen here, at least not right now. I'm sort of known to be a glass half empty kind of person. And my peers here will say, Jenny, don't put that out in the universe. But I like to deal with reality. And we have to figure out other ways. Instead of complaining all the time about how our state government doesn't support what we want them to support, then you just have to accept it, continue to fight the good fight, and move on and find funds from other sources. So we targeted and looked at what sources were available here, and we tried to diversify. We don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket and only get funding from one source, because if we lose that, then we've got nothing, no program whatsoever. So we did a multiple level request and ask for grant funding, and we're going to continue to do that. I think that we have to forge our own paths, while all of us do, in a way, through partnerships, promotion, training, education, and bragging. And yes, we bragged a lot. We bragged about Neil Horan. We bragged about the model. We bragged about the Center of Excellence. We bragged about Georgetown and all of the equity that this model can bring to a community. And I'll tell you, the reason why is because it shifts racism in a different way, because the consultation model requires one to truly think and contemplate how to serve this particular child with this particular teacher and this particular family at this time and space. It is not cookie cutter. So we decided to accept it. You know, funding was limited or non-existent, and look at what was possible and work on that. And I mean, we had to wait a long time, but it worked. It finally worked, and we are doing it. Be careful what you wish for, though. We spent years fighting and trying to convince people, trying to win. It's like a campaign, you know, to win office. And now we have to completely shift our focus from fighting to get something to making sure that we're doing it and doing it right with careful thought and consideration. Despite all the barriers, we were able to pull it off thus far. And now we really have to do the good work in order to replicate it throughout the county and expand the impact to others. I mean, we promised everybody that if they funded this, it would make a difference. And now we have to uphold that promise. We have to really make sure that we're putting all of our hearts and souls into this, and that the people that we hire are doing the same thing. We believe that the data that represents disparity will continue to shift over time, along with our societal changes that I mentioned earlier in our community, coinciding with what we're doing here at Learning Empowered, and show less and less of that inequity in our community, and that IECMHC will be recognized as a contributing factor or a part of that. On the plenary session this morning, Don Yazzie, there's a lot of beautiful things that were said. Angela Keys, I was trying to write down everything she said because it was so beautiful and profound, and I couldn't keep up with it and listen at the same time. So I don't remember everything she said, but it was wonderful. But I did hear what Dawn said, and she said that if you decide to be a helper of other humans, it is heavy work and it is hard work. And we are realizing that when we are dealing with the children that we have in our, especially our Triangles program. I mean, the level and intensity of pain and suffering and the way they're expressing themselves is pretty profound. And it is hard work, but we did make a choice to help humans, and this is what we're going to continue to do. We're not going to stop. We're here. We have big enough shoulders to carry the load, and we have the mindset and the support and the infrastructure. Georgetown Center of Excellence is an amazing resource to make sure that we are getting it right throughout the country, and we're grateful for that. So anyway, I am going to stop talking now, and I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Dr. Lisa Negrini.
Thank you. And Jenny, I want to just say something about funding in the state of Florida. And so our children's services councils here in Florida that are funded mostly through the ad valorem real estate tax structure have been very supportive of the consultation model. And several of the children's services councils have made great investments in consultation in South of Florida in Hillsborough County, and the Juvenile Welfare Board of Pinellas County has been instrumental in launching the consultative model here in our county, and have really invested in the birth to 5 model, provided funding alongside of United Way for the 2 programs that we have, and we really feel the level of commitment from the Children's Services Councils for birth to 5. And that is wonderful because, as Jenny said earlier, on the state level, we're not seeing the support for mental health and substance abuse and services for families with young children in general in the way that we need them. And so just kind of getting to the how and why. And so we talked a little bit about the why. And so we understand that our community is not unique in the fact that we have had a decrease in addressing systemic issues, systemic racism, economic factors, things that create inequities to begin with. We've had a lack in funding due to lots of reasons, and it's different in every community in every state. We have a lack of teachers trained to be able to do the job because of everything that happened during COVID and the pressures on the workforce for trained teachers. And we've got lots of issues in terms of trained mental health folks as well. And so when we think about what do we really need to do to create classroom environments that are supportive to kids that have complex behaviors and families who need to build resiliency, you know, we're really thinking about what are we missing? And so part of being able to go to your Children's Services Council or to your legislator or to a foundation is being able to say, here we are, and let's represent the things that we need to have kids school ready and have kids ready to be successful when they get to school. And right now we have a lack of mental health for children and families, lack of awareness of the importance of the early years, lack of knowledge about the word gap and the education gap and the educational disparities that exist. We have a lack of professional skills. We have a lack of systems that support resiliency for families with young children, right? Childcare is really expensive and sometimes inaccessible, and quality care is really hard to find, especially for our infants and toddlers. And so we've got a lot of social challenges, and being able to really address the needs of young children and families. And our how here in Pinellas County has really revolved around our ability to identify these issues, talk about them in a cohesive way that helps inform our funding entities of the importance of those early years in future success and building outcomes, and being able then to partner with our funders and our foundations to be able to implement services. And so our partnership with the Juvenile Welfare Board has been tremendous. We've just launched these 2 new programs, and we're really excited to be able to talk about how do we get past some of the barriers and obstacles that exist from all the things that we just talked about to launch a successful program and to move forward in building, expanding, and serving our community. And so one of the things that Learning Empowered had that was as a definite strength for us was infant mental health expertise, which my background is infant mental health and mental health in general. And then coming in and partnering with both Toshiko and Jenny, who are experts in education. And so we have a combined workforce interagency of clinical social workers, mental health professionals, early childhood educators, doctorate level researchers. And so we've got a great combination of professionals, which has made a big difference in terms of the way that we laid out the program for success, the way that we're pacing ourselves, and we are bringing online the services in a very thoughtful and kind of paced and methodological way to set ourselves up for long-term success. And so one of the things that we know that we wanted to do was to prepare our workforce to be able to launch the consultation model. So Jenny, if you could turn to the next slide. And so in thinking about how did we do that, what we really started to think about was how do we develop our team? So how do you build a team of infant and early childhood mental health consultants where that job title and that work didn't exist before? And so because the market, the professional market to be able to hire in licensed mental health professionals is astronomical and incredibly difficult right now. So I don't know how it is in other communities, but licensed mental health professionals are less and less willing to work in the field. It's expensive to have them work in the field, and we don't have enough. And so there's a lot of competition with mental health organizations bringing in experienced and licensed folks to be able to do the work of a consultant. And it was interesting hearing this morning, hearing the talk about, do you think that it's important, what's the level of education, right? So licensure and experience and understanding child development, it's a complex job with a lot of very complex needs, for everything from working with adults, working in collaboration with teachers, understanding early childhood development, knowing early learning, being able to partner with other professionals, being able to understand young children and what they need and how they express their needs and how those needs can be addressed. And so lots of skills are required to do the consultative job, and those skills are built skills. And so many of us come to this field with some knowledge. Either we worked with kids, or we worked with adults, or we worked in early learning, but have, very few people are coming in to this field having all of those pieces and parts. And so one of the things that we did was we hired folks early in their careers. That's what we could afford to do. And we hired folks that had some experience working before they got their master's in mental health or social work, working in early learning. So they have backgrounds in being teachers in the classroom. And that's what we were seeking. And so at this point, recruiting, engaging, training and retaining staff, whether that's teachers in an early learning center or consultants. I mean, that is a big issue that we are all working through. And so we are bringing in folks, and we have a very, very strong training regimen. And so, and I call it a regiment because we're very serious about making sure that we've got onboarding training. We've got training that creates opportunities for staff to learn about consultation, equity, systemic racism, white fragility, child development. I mean, we have a training plan actually that is quite extensive, and I think it's been incredibly important in readying the consultants to go into the field, right? Understanding community engagement. How do you move in environments and systems with alongside early learning professionals, and what does that look like? And so really trying to create an opportunity for our consultants to have meaningful connection with the centers in the community that we're working with, and be able to take that stance where they're able to support teachers, provide for teachers what they need. Because remember, some of our teachers have been teaching and in the community for long periods of time, and they know so much, and they are seeing behaviors in the classroom post-COVID that they've never seen before. And our social circumstances here in our community involve deep issues of inequities that have created shortages in affordable housing, food deserts, barriers in transportation, lack of opportunities to access mental health and substance abuse services, lots of issues that are barriers to families being able to build their resiliency and be able to meet the needs of their children. And so our commitment was really to developing opportunities to train our staff and help our staff really understand what is our community circumstance, how are our families struggling, what does that tell us about how our centers may be struggling, and what our teachers may be needing, whether it's training, support, or a listening ear, access to a broader scope of resources. And so after training, we're talking a lot about our reflective process, right? That parallel process of how do we, as management, hold our consultants and make sure that they're feeling supported and engaged and connected, and they've got someone to talk to, and they've got somebody to be with. And then how do our consultants then hold the teachers and be able to help the teachers in their process, in their stress and their struggle, and working with children and families. And so we're really thinking a lot about the infant mental health concepts that are kind of the core of both the diversity informed tenets, as well as the principles around the endorsement process, and helping our consultants become more aware and get more training on infant mental health services and supports. Next slide. And so I want to talk a little bit, this is a little bit about our training, and I think it's really important that we take a look at this, because at the time that we built our training, we really wanted to think, how can we promote an anti-racist platform where we are actively addressing the cultural disconnect that happens in our community. And so how are we working together to examine the barriers in educational equity that we have here in our community? How are we challenging implicit bias? How are we working together to reduce educational disparities? And really, what is an anti-bias classroom, right? And how do we promote that? And how do we work with teachers on promoting equity and issues around anti-racism? And and what does that mean about how we move into our community and actually serve in childcare centers, in family childcare homes, and the relationships that we create that promote that. And I think it's really important that we talk about what is it that we are doing to rub up against the institutional racism and boundaries that we have had for so long. And Toshiko and Jenny both talked about this, but looking at those systemic barriers. Jenny, next slide. Kind of looking at all of those issues and how important it is that we're addressing those by creating systems that reduce barriers. And so thinking about, do we have an organization that reflects the community that we serve? What does our board look like? What does our leadership look like? How are we engaging and hiring in diverse staff, having diversity in consultants, making sure that we have consultants that relate to the culture of the centers that they're serving. And so making an effort to ensure that we're bringing in staff that are multilingual and that represent our communities, and that we have great depth in the diversity of the staff members that are serving, the partnering with us, right, at our organization to serve the community. And that has been a real focus in making sure that we are addressing our hiring practices and really looking at supervision and management and how we create space for folks and support wellness. We talk a lot about self-care, and we're really committed to ensuring that our employees, our consultants are taking care of themselves, are getting time for themselves, are getting opportunities for sharing and for being able to make meaningful connections with each other. And so I think that this is a really important concept, because we know that in our communities, in early learning centers, staff are not getting the relief that they need. So wellness, I mean, high rates of burnout, high rates of stress and depression in our early learning community, lots of centers closing down because they can't find staff. So we have lots of systemic issues that kind of all relate to how do we take care of ourselves in this field, and the consultants need to, again, that parallel process. How do we take care of our staff in the program to be able to have our consultants go out into a center and be able to say to a teacher, how are you taking care of yourself? How are you? Are you okay? Right? How can I help you? And so just having that ability to bring that compassionate voice and listening ear into the community is just critical to the foundation of the program. That's who we want to be as a program. And if we're going to be successful providing consultation long term, those are the relationships that we have to develop. And so if I had to say one thing before I take questions about what we are emphasizing right now, it's relationships, right? Our relationships with our funders, that connection, that communication, our relationship with our community, with our early learning providers, making those connections, developing those relationships, our internal relationships with our consultants and with our staff and with our teachers. Those are the things that come to mind as the most important part of building an infant and early childhood mental health consultation program. So these are some of the actions, but we're a little short on time. Please take a second to read these over, and we would be happy. We've got just a couple of minutes to take questions. So if anybody has a question, please feel free to unmute and present a question to Toshiko or Jenny or I. Jenny, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. We have 2 minutes.
Well, I guess the reason they're not asking any questions is because we've given them all the answers. And they know exactly what to do now. So if you want to reach out to us, we're available. We're happy to partner and help anybody who wants to try to do this in their community over and above what the Center of Excellence has to do. And we are grateful to have been a part of this and hope that we all got something out of it. And thank you, Francis, for all of your support.
I want to say a big thank you to the team, the One Child team. This presentation, I had so many takeaways from it. Just really the way that you really understood your community, which I think is that just critical piece. And then a lot of how you were so strategic really about bringing in some outside expertise to help share the message that you all really wanted to share. You had some really thoughtful places where you had meetings with specific champions that you wanted to bring there. And then of course, a little bit of momentum with some of those different policy things. And certainly that article that you spoke to where the media certainly can be your friend in that case to really get some movement. So I know we're at time, but I know I took a bunch of things away, as I'm sure others did, about how, even as you said, Jenny, sometimes when it might seem the glass is half empty, it really can be half full if you've got the right team of people behind you. So much appreciation to you all and for the hard work that you're doing. I wish you all the best. So we are at time. So we will let people go ahead and get on to their next session. But again, thank you all so much. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone. Thanks so much for attending.
Take care.
Thank you.